Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Joey with Last Few Spins, and today we're going to be talking about an artist that has never shied away from flexing her imagination, whether it comes to her music or her wardrobe. But with her latest release, Mayhem, Lady Gaga makes it all about the music. We see her channel some of her past sounds and even dip into some new things. But kind of my main takeaway, which I'll get to later in the video, is that this album for Lady Gaga is almost like her Eras tour, but in like album form, because we just get so much of her early stuff and we get some of her later stuff too in terms of the sounds that I get. A strength of this album is that it's non-linear, like it's not just the same thing over and over again. Every song feels like its own thing. So that's definitely a strength whenever an artist can mix it up within the same album, but in this case it all feels like it's of the same essence. So Lady Gaga has said in interviews about this album that it finds her at her healthiest as a songwriter, where she feels free to talk about some of her more positive life experiences, as she's not so bogged down with like industry bullshit that she's maybe like written about before. So she can kind of channel some really good emotions with some of these songs. And it's interesting that she feels this way because whenever you look at the album cover for Mayhem, it still kind of seems like someone who is still strung out from just being stressed out, and is still kind of bogged down by these things that she says she's distanced herself from. I see her face on the cover of Mayhem, and you would think that this album is like just this dreary type of thing, just talking about some of her pitfalls and stuff like that, but it's really the complete opposite of that. Perhaps this album cover is supposed to portray her after like a night of partying or something. That would make more sense after hearing the album, or perhaps in my own imagination, maybe this type of picture that we find on the cover is like when she just got done performing one of the harder hitting songs like Perfect Celebrity. I would imagine that would like take a lot out of her, and you find her in this picture on the cover, which is a strong cover. And it just seems like she's been through something, whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience. The content within this album seems more positive and like upbeat. But I guess you never truly know what she's going through. But one thing with Lady Gaga is everything seems very intentional. Every little word and every little beat within this album, it's there for a reason, and a lot of it works really well. And also a side note about the Perfect Celebrity song that I just mentioned. It is one of my favorites on the album. But as I was listening to it, I thought, her voice, it's definitely held up very well over the 20-year career or whatever. But I feel like her and the chick from Phantogram sounds a lot alike. And I think whenever I was listening to Phantogram a lot, I didn't realize how much maybe they base their sound off of some of Lady Gaga's stuff. Because they really do some of the same type of things with their vocals. It kind of once they reach that higher register, it gets kind of like a grit to it. I think it's a super cool way of singing, but I just thought it was funny how I kind of caught those similarities between Lady Gaga and a lesser artist for sure of Phantogram. I like both regardless. So Lady Gaga has also said about Mayhem that she's found her way to dance again. And you definitely hear this on a lot of the tracks, such as Abracadabra. I will say that's not one of my favorites overall. I think it can get a little bit choppy with, how she's kind of singing those made-up words in the chorus. I think that's not necessarily, not pleasing to my ears personally. I think also another like interesting thing about that song, it's almost like the same melody or note structure as Mad World by Tears for Fears. So you might kind of like check that out and do an A and B comparison. Abracadabra by Lady Gaga and Mad World by Tears for Fears. Garden of Eden also has that same kind of choppiness within the chorus, but this one really doesn't work for me. Which kind of sucks because the album leads off with Disease, a really, really strong song, and then I think that's one of my least favorite parts of the album is like Abracadabra and then Garden of Eden. I think like the lead up to the chorus and like the beginning of the chorus sounds really good, but then once she starts kind of breaking it down towards the end, it just doesn't work for me. But there are songs that have that kind of like dance type of feeling that I really do like, such as LoveDrug. I think that's one of the stronger tracks on the album. She's mentioned that during the production of this album, she wrestled back and forth on wanting it to sound like more chaotic at times. And I think in some ways that may have needed to be reined in a little bit, because you have songs like Vanish Into You, which overall is, I think, a pretty good track. Where that kind of suffers from that like chaoticness is how the verses are so good, and you're like, let's go, you know, freaking let's, it just sounds great. And then you get to the chorus and it's just kind of like a letdown. So, you know, while these songs, they're each their own thing, sometimes within the same song, it can get like a little bit too off track. And it's almost like in one song you have half really good and half bleh. So she never really like puts together too many complete songs in this album, which is kind of like a little bit of a gripe for me, I guess. But where the chaoticness does work is in the production of the album. So Andrew Watt was the producer of this album, and this must be like his wheelhouse. It's just like these hard-hitting pop albums. In the lead-off track, for example, Disease, the bass just feels great. It's just the drums have a lot of punch, and that's one thing that is pretty consistent throughout. Is it's under control in the fact that it's professional and it sounds you know, clear, but it is chaotic where it's like, whoa, there's a lot going on. And but in the production, it really works, I feel like. Just a few notes about some songs in particular. How Bad Do You Want Me? I feel like is a straight up Taylor Swift song. Some artists try to channel like a Taylor Swift sound. They make themselves smaller, where they're kind of more hushed, and you get that like breathier vocal like a Gracie Abrams or something like that. But in this case, Lady Gaga like channels kind of a louder version of Taylor Swift, where other artists might collapse into themselves, but she is still like her own big boisterous, you know, she maintains her own artistry and how she typically is. Just the song structure, and even sometimes with her voice, it's like dead on a Taylor Swift song, I swear. And I know Die With A Smile, towards the end of the album, it actually might be the last track, with Bruno Mars. I don't know why, but just anything with Bruno Mars just reeks of like top 40 minivan unoriginality, like just the type of crap that's like coworker music, I guess. Just not really at its essence very very catchy. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like it's probably going to be a big song just because you have these two huge artists together, but not one of my favorites on the album. And there's like a 3-song stretch, kind of a where she dips into some funky sounds with some funky stuff, you know, with the song Killah. I don't know how well she can like pull that sound off, to be completely honest. Then the tempo picks up even more than that with Zombieboy. That's another one that's kind of like a throwaway track for me, but sort of like a fever breaking from that. Those couple songs, LoveDrug comes around and is one of my favorite songs on the album, as I kind of mentioned earlier. It feels like quintessential Lady Gaga, like in terms of what I think about Lady Gaga sounding like. This is just listen to LoveDrug and that's what you're gonna get. Which kind of brings me to my main takeaway from the album itself, which I touched on at the beginning, is that this album feels like her very own Eras tour in album form, where she channels every bit of like what she's done well over the years. And like specific examples, Blade of Grass towards the end, I feel like it's just shallow. It's a pretty good little like love song. I heard her talk about the story behind this and how her and her boyfriend or husband, man, whatever, they were kind of in the yard talking, and they had this cute little moment with a blade of grass. And so that's a good like slower song that really was needed at that part of the album. Call Me Tonight, you know, strikes the same type of chord as Alejandro. I swear this has to be like on purpose, because just the way that the chorus kind of starts, just the call me blank, you know, fill in the blank with what each song does. Those are just super similar, I feel like. So that's kind of like part of her career that I guess she's maybe channeling in Mayhem. And then Abracadabra really feels like a Born This Way type of song, just with that same kind of beat and that same kind of just charging rhythm. Abracadabra, you know, might not be as good as Born This Way in my opinion, but you know, those 3 examples, I'm sure I could go even further. Those are just ones where I feel like it's kind of a callback to a previous hit of hers, which there's nothing wrong with that. I just think, you know, we're kind of going through the different generations of Lady Gaga on this album, and it's almost like a greatest hits package with new material, if that makes sense. And one big comparison I wanted to make in terms of this album versus another artist who is very similar. You have like Katy Perry last year. She had an album 143 or 143. I guess it doesn't matter how you say it. It sucked. But, you know, it's kind of like they were each getting big around the same time frame. You know, the late 2000s or 2010, 2011, whatever you want to say. And then, you know, they find themselves kind of each advertising that this is like they're getting back to their roots type of album. With Katy Perry last year, hers was like devoid of any fun or joy. You know, it was just like so generic and so lifeless. Where Lady Gaga differs from that is that, you know, this album Mayhem, it has plenty of life and like plenty of enthusiasm, and you can like honestly, whenever you hear her say that she's got her ability to write about like positive experiences back, you believe her, because like this album is pretty solid. It's inspired, and it's not just it's rehashing the same type of sounds that, you know, we're used to hearing from Lady Gaga, but kind of one song at a time is channeling like a different era of hers. So definitely not a one-trick pony. You get a lot of different things within Mayhem, which is definitely a strength of it for sure. So with all this being said, in terms of giving this album a rating, I feel like Lady Gaga's Mayhem is a 3.5 out of 5. Maybe on the lower end of that. You know, it's definitely got a few songs that I kept in my library. Disease, Perfect Celebrity, and LoveDrug. I think those were the best tracks. And then, you know, some of the ones that take away from it. One I didn't really mention anything about, but like The Beast and Shadow of a Man, kind of forgettable. And then, you know, I don't really like Die With a Smile. I think it's just kind of cheesy. And overall, definitely a solid collection of songs. This is something that will propel Lady Gaga to have several, I don't want to say hits, but, you know, some momentum into the summer, I'm sure. So definitely a good effort out of her. So that about wraps it up for this album review. If you enjoyed this, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed here to Last Few Spins so you don't miss further album reviews or different videos I've been doing with like deep dives of different music topics. And I want to do some more like album ranking type things. I'm on a quest as well to hit 25 shows in 2025. So definitely follow along with that. That's going to be exciting to not only capture throughout this year, but also share with you all. So definitely tag along with the subscribe button to follow with all that. And then like this video. If you have any other feelings about Lady Gaga's album that you'd like to share with me, please drop them down in the comments, and I'd love to continue the conversation down there. But until next time, thank you for watching.